There were two mugs on the kitchen counter. One was mine, chipped, navy blue, still wet from the dishwasher. The other was white, floral, and steaming, fresh. But the house was silent. No footsteps upstairs, no music from her studio. Just the faint ticking of the old wall clock and a strange synthetic scent I couldn't place, like warm plastic or the inside of a taxi cab. I called out her name once, quietly, no answer. My keys were still in my hand. I hadn't even taken off my boots. Something told me not to move too fast, like I'd stumbled into the wrong version of my own life, and one wrong step might make the illusion collapse. Then I heard it. Upstairs. A voice, not hers, male. And then her voice, sharp and panicked. "You're too early!" 3 words. That's it. Not even a scream, really. More like a command dipped in terror. I didn't go up. Instead, I stood there frozen next to the coffee mugs, staring at the ceiling like it might open up and swallow me whole. She'd made him coffee, fresh. I looked down at the floor and saw a single black sock. Not mine. Too small, no holes. That's when I knew. This wasn't the beginning of the end. This was the middle of something that had already been going on. Something rehearsed. Something they never expected me to interrupt. And still, for reasons I can't explain, I whispered, "Sorry." Like I was the one who was intruding, like I had done something wrong by coming home to my own house. I didn't leave the house. I didn't storm upstairs. I didn't even breathe right. Instead, I stepped backward into the laundry room, like I was dodging a spotlight. My own heartbeat was so loud, I thought for sure they'd hear it. I wasn't thinking clearly. I wasn't thinking at all. But my hands moved on their own, reaching for the dryer door, yanking it open, then slowly pushing it shut again, just to make noise. A warning. I was giving them a warning, announcing my arrival as if I hadn't already been announced by the shriek of, "You're too early." And still, the silence upstairs stayed thick, like whatever was happening had instantly been swallowed into concrete. I heard a bathroom door shut. Software too soft for someone who had nothing to hide. Then her voice again, this time louder, smoother, like it had been prepped. "Babe, you're home already?" I couldn't speak. I don't know why. My mouth was dry, like I'd chewed sand. I stood in front of the washing machine, staring at it like it might suddenly explain all of this. She came downstairs with her hair half damp, wearing one of my old flannel shirts, something she only did when she wanted me to feel close to her, or when she felt guilty. I remember the look in her eyes. It wasn't surprise, it was assessment. She was checking what I knew. I asked something dumb like, "You showered?" As if I hadn't heard the whole exchange 15 minutes ago. She laughed. "Yeah, wanted to warm up. It's freezing today." That was the first lie, not the cheating, not the hidden voice upstairs, but that weather excuse. It was late July, 85 degrees, and I said nothing. We went through the motions. She handed me the lemonade I'd left on the counter, asked about my day, all with her voice 2 pitches higher than normal, her teacher voice, the one she used with parents who asked too many questions. And I played along. Until she went to the backyard to water the basil, another lie, since the plants were fake, and I slipped upstairs. There was no sign of him, but the bathroom smelled like unfamiliar cologne, not cheap, but not anything I owned. A gray towel, slightly damp, hung on the hook behind the door. She never used the gray ones, said they felt too scratchy. Then I saw the mirror. It was fogged, but in the upper corner, someone had written in the condensation with a finger. One word, now half smudged, like it had been wiped quickly and poorly. Soon. That was it, just soon. Not love you, not I miss you. Just that cold, weightless promise hanging on the glass like it had no business being in my house. She called from downstairs, too chipper. "Hey, want lunch?" I didn't respond. I stared at that word, soon, and suddenly I felt like the intruder in a story that had already been written. A story I was never meant to see until the final chapter. And worse, something about that word made it clear. They weren't planning to stop. That night, I pretended to sleep. Darla was beside me, scrolling through her phone longer than usual. Her thumb moved in slow circles, not the quick taps of someone flipping through apps or messages, but the lazy, methodical motions of someone rereading the same thread again and again. I watched her through barely parted eyelids, careful not to move. Every time the screen dimmed, she'd tap it awake like a nervous tick. At 1:08 a.m., she finally put the phone down. Not on the nightstand like always, but under her pillow. I stared at the ceiling for what felt like hours after her breathing leveled out. Something inside me had shifted, and I wasn't proud of what came next. Around 3 a.m., I gently slipped my hand under her pillow, lifted the phone, and slid out of the room like a thief. I'd never gone through her phone before, not once in nearly a decade of marriage. I used to think that was a point of pride, of trust, but now it just felt like stupidity disguised as virtue. Her screen was locked, but I knew the code. She thought I didn't. She had changed it a year ago after a client emailed her some risque photos by accident. She made a joke about boundaries and changed it to our anniversary date reversed. I only remembered because I'd written it in my planner like a loser who still color-coded birthdays. The phone opened, no smoking gun, no photos, no saved messages, but the browser history told a different story. Private mode, of course, but she had forgotten one tab. It was a hotel. Local, not downtown, not expensive. One of those weird spots next to the highway with a vending machine in the lobby and a neon open sign that buzzes all night. The reservation was under a man's name I didn't recognize, R. Thatchley. The next morning, I acted like everything was fine. I asked about her lesson plan. I asked if Bandit had eaten. I smiled like someone who didn't know about the mirror message or the sock or the reservation made 3 days ago under a stranger's name. But my stomach was slowly folding in on itself. I went to work, sort of. I sat in my car outside the office for 20 minutes before driving past the city limits and parking behind an empty Shell station to call the hotel. I was sweating. My hand shook as I dialed. "Thank you for calling Rockside Inn. How can I—" I didn't let her finish. I gave the name, the date, asked if the room was still reserved. She paused. "Yes," she said. "But the guest already checked in yesterday." Checked in. My hands went cold. I was gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing tethering me to the ground. I asked for the room number. She refused. Policy. I asked if the guest had been alone. She hesitated again, long enough to confirm what I already knew. And then she said, like she couldn't help herself, "Is this about the woman who came in last night?" I didn't answer. I hung up. The world outside my windshield didn't make sense anymore. People pumping gas, a guy walking a dog, kids on bikes. All of it moved too easily, too happily, like they didn't know the floor beneath their lives could vanish at any second. As I sat there, phone in hand, staring into the haze of late morning heat rising off the asphalt, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost let it ring out, but something, instinct, fate, punishment, made me answer. A voice, male, quiet. He didn't say hello. He said, "You don't know me, but you need to listen carefully." My chest locked. He said her name, my wife's. He said, "She's not who you think she is, and she's not just lying to you. She's lying to him too." Before I could speak, he added, "Check your dog's collar. Today." Then the line went dead, and suddenly I remembered something strange. The night before, Bandit wouldn't stop scratching at his neck. Darla had taken off his collar and said she was going to wash it. But it wasn't in the laundry room. It wasn't in the kitchen. It wasn't anywhere. I hadn't even thought to ask. Until now. I didn't go home right away. I circled the block 4 times, thinking. Not really forming thoughts, just cycling through the same mental noise. Who was that man? What did he mean, check the collar? Was this real? Or had I finally cracked under my own cowardice? Eventually I parked down the street. I didn't want her to see me through the front window. I didn't want her to know I was home until I had answers. When I stepped inside, the air felt wrong. Not tense, but expectant. Like the house was waiting for something to happen. Darla was gone. A note on the fridge said, "Groceries, back in 20." I stared at that heart for too long. It looked like a signature now, the kind you leave at the bottom of a contract before you disappear. Bandit didn't bark. He padded around the corner quietly, tail wagging slow and low, like he wasn't sure if I was mad or sad. I sat on the floor beside him and whispered, "Good boy," like he'd just come back from war. He rolled onto his back and let me scratch his neck, and there it was, the bare spot where his collar used to be. I found it in the laundry room, folded neatly on top of the detergent box. That alone felt odd. Darla usually tossed it on the counter, or let it dangle from a hook. I turned it over in my hands. At first glance, nothing strange. Just the usual worn leather, the metal buckle, the faint scent of dog shampoo. But then my fingers caught something unfamiliar. a thin, hard line near the inner seam. I held it closer. There, along the edge, barely visible, the stitching was uneven, like someone had resewn a small section by hand. I grabbed a seam ripper from Darla's sewing drawer. My hands were sweating. Every part of me said, "Don't do this. Put it down." But I kept going, carefully slicing the thread until I could peel back the leather just enough to find what had been hidden inside. It was a tiny SD card, no label, no case. Just a raw, black chip, no bigger than my fingernail. My heart was pounding now. I felt like I'd just stepped through a door in my house I never knew existed. Something was wrong, not just emotionally or morally, but mechanically. I no longer understood how the walls around me worked. I didn't own a card reader, but Darla did. She used it for her photography class. I dug it out of her desk drawer, plugged it into her old laptop, the one she never let me use, and waited. It took a moment to load. The folder had no name. It contained 5 files, all video clips. I opened the first one. No introduction, no timestamp. Just grainy security camera footage, wide angle, low quality. It was Darla, in a hallway I didn't recognize, knocking on a door. When it opened, she didn't hesitate. She stepped inside and closed it behind her. The second file was from inside a car, her car. She was in the driver's seat, smiling. She looked at whoever was filming and said, "He still has no idea. It's almost fun now." The voice behind the camera laughed, but didn't speak. Just a low, throaty chuckle that made my stomach twist. The third file was audio only. It was recorded secretly. My voice was in it. It was me, on the phone with my sister a few months ago, talking about our anniversary dinner. I'd made reservations. I was excited. In the clip I say, "I just hope she likes it. She's been distant lately, but I'm probably just imagining things." Then silence. Then Darla's voice, layered on top in the same file, mocking, "He's such a sap. He still thinks he's planning surprises." It's almost sweet. I didn't play the 4th or 5th file. I couldn't. My hands wouldn't move. I just sat there, paralyzed, feeling my body go cold. Not from heartbreak. That had happened earlier. This was something worse. This was the feeling of knowing that someone wasn't just hiding something from you. They were watching you not know. They were recording it, curating it, like your pain was part of some secret project. That's when I heard the sound. A quiet click from the hallway behind me. I turned slowly and saw the attic door, the one above the hallway closet, swinging down gently, the ladder extending toward the floor. It hadn't been open earlier. I hadn't touched it. And Darla wasn't home yet. I stood there, frozen beneath the open attic hatch, watching the ladder stretch down, like a tongue unfurling from some mouth I hadn't noticed above me until now. It wasn't even the sound of it opening that had startled me. It was the timing, precise, as if triggered by something. Not movement, not a draft, no click of a spring-loaded latch, just open. I didn't want to climb up. In fact, I wanted to walk straight out of the house and never look back. My body was sending every signal. Goosebumps, tight chest, a rising buzz in my ears like a pressure drop before a nosebleed. But you don't get to pretend anymore after you've pulled a memory card out of your dog's collar. You stop pretending when your marriage starts playing back to you like security footage. So, I climbed, step by step, into the dark. The attic was low and cramped, with exposed beams and that itchy yellow insulation puffing out like tumor growths between the rafters. The single bulb hanging overhead flickered when I pulled the string. Not fully out, just a pulsing dim glow like a dying heartbeat. I hadn't been up here in years, not since we moved in. We used it for boxes mostly. Old Halloween decorations, high school yearbooks, the kinds of things you think you'll look at again but never do. And yet, the dust was wrong. It should have been thick, undisturbed. But near the far end, behind a stack of moving crates and an old coat rack, there was a clean path, a narrow trail where footprints had brushed away the filth. Recently. I followed it, crouching low so I didn't crack my skull on the beams. That's when I saw it. A small metal tripod, not tall, only about 2 feet high, wedged between boxes like someone had hidden it quickly. Mounted on top, a compact black camera, the kind with motion sensors, sleek, new, still powered on. It had been filming, maybe still was. It wasn't pointed at the attic, though. The lens was angled down. through a narrow rectangular hole that had been sawed through the floorboards and disguised beneath an old heating vent in the hallway ceiling. Right above our bedroom, I stared at it, my brain stalling. The vent had always been there, decorative I thought, or maybe left over from some old duct system the previous owner removed. I'd never once looked up at it and considered that it might not be real. There were cables running from the camera to a small external drive taped beneath the floorboard. Carefully. Deliberately. Like someone didn't just want footage, they wanted backup, redundancy, paranoia even. I turned the drive over and saw a symbol drawn in Sharpie. It wasn't a letter or a number. It was a circle with a vertical line through the middle, like an eye trying to stay shut. I don't know why, but seeing that symbol, hand-drawn, casual, almost childish, was what finally made my stomach turn. That was the moment I realized I didn't just stumble on a camera. I'd stumbled on a pattern. Someone had done this before, not just here. I took the camera and the drive. I lowered myself back down into the hallway and closed the attic silently behind me. Darla still wasn't home. The house felt heavier than it had 20 minutes ago, like whatever secrets had been nesting above us all this time had finally noticed I was paying attention. I plugged the drive into my laptop. There were hundreds of files. Most were time-lapse sequences, hours of compressed footage taken from above the bed, sped up to show the rise and fall of sleep, the tossing and turning, the slow curl of two bodies shifting toward or away from each other, night after night. It looked like choreography, like a story being told without words. But then came the stills, screenshots, carefully chosen, cropped, some were of me, alone, sitting at the edge of the bed with my head in my hands. Others were of her, standing by the window, phone in hand, not smiling, not frowning, just watching something through the glass. One image was labeled 12C observation. The next one, 12C_resistance. The third, 12C recalibration attempt. I wasn't Lowell, not in these files. I was 12C, and Darla wasn't the one labeling them. Whoever was behind this, they weren't recording for leverage or for blackmail. They were studying us, me, us together, our patterns, our decisions, our decline, as if we were part of an experiment already halfway finished. That's when I heard the garage door open. Darla was home, and I suddenly didn't know which was scarier, that she might be part of this, or that she might not. Darla stepped through the door, carrying a brown paper bag filled with produce and 3 lemons rolling loose at the top. She looked at me like she always did, casual, curious, performative, except today, something in her expression lingered just a second too long, like her brain had to reboot into the version of herself she used with me. "Hey, babe," she said, brushing hair behind her ear. "You're home early." That word again, early. I stared at her. My hands were still behind my back, fingers curled tightly around the hard plastic of the camera I'd pulled from the attic. I hadn't decided whether I was going to show it to her, or smash it in front of her, or just lie and pretend I hadn't seen anything. But then she said something so absurd, so off-center, that it turned the room inside out. "I had the weirdest dream," she said, almost playfully, as she unpacked the bag. "You were standing in the attic, watching me through the vent, but the weird part is, it felt like I was the one looking down, and you didn't know." I didn't respond. I couldn't. My heart twisted. Not because it was close to what had happened, but because it was exact. She was describing the layout, the angle, the feeling, even the timing. She turned around, holding a cucumber, smiling. "Creepy, right?" "Did you tell anyone about that dream?" I asked, my voice thinner than I expected. She blinked. "Number? I just woke up with it this morning. You were already gone." I walked slowly to the counter and set the camera down. She looked at it. Her smile dimmed by degrees, but didn't disappear completely. Just softened, like she was trying to figure out if this was a joke. "Where'd you get that?" "I could ask you the same." A pause. Then, and I swear this is the part that won't leave me, she didn't ask what it recorded. She didn't ask if I'd watched it. She didn't even deny knowing about it. She said, "It's not supposed to be here anymore." Her voice was quiet, not afraid, more like someone commenting on a spill that shouldn't have stained. I stepped forward. "Who put it there?" She looked me in the eyes for the first time in what felt like days. "I don't remember," she said, and something in her tone told me that wasn't a lie. "But I knew about it. Once. I think I asked them to remove it. But I don't remember when or why. This was the moment I should have grabbed my keys and walked out the door. But I didn't. Instead, I did something stupid. I asked her if she remembered the name R. Thatchley. Her eyes didn't widen, her shoulders didn't tense. But a small vein near her jaw twitched, so briefly that I might have imagined it. "That name is familiar," she said slowly. "But not recent? Was that someone you worked with?" I shook my head. "I found a reservation," I said, "at a motel, made under that name, the same night you said you had a late staff meeting." "I never said that," she answered instantly. Her voice wasn't defensive, it was confused. "I said I was going to the art supply warehouse." "No, you didn't. You said late meeting. It was Monday." "No, I said warehouse. I remember because I couldn't find parking and had to walk 4 blocks. We stood there, staring at each other, both certain the other was wrong. But we weren't fighting. We were misaligned. Like 2 separate versions of the same day were now trying to coexist, overlapping, glitching, colliding. And suddenly, I had a terrifying realization. What if she was telling the truth? Not about everything. Not about the affair, but about memory. What if her recollections weren't lies, but rewrites? I opened the laptop. The files from the attic drive were still up. I clicked on the video labeled 12C recalibration attempt. The clip opened in silence. It showed me sitting in the kitchen, exactly here, in this same seat, holding a notepad. Darla across from me, drinking from a yellow mug with a crack near the handle. I'd thrown that mug out 3 months ago. But in this footage, it was whole. "Do you ever feel like someone else is writing you?" I asked on screen. Darla smiled and replied, "Only when I'm awake." And then the video froze. Cut to black. My Darla looked at the screen, face slack with confusion. That never happened. "It's dated May 12th. We were in Michigan then," she said. "My mom's birthday." "No, we weren't," I replied. "That trip was canceled. Remember? She had COVID." "No," she whispered. "She had COVID in March." A silence fell between us, so dense it felt like the house itself was listening. Then she asked, almost childlike, "What if we're both right?" That broke me. I stood up too fast. The chair screeched. I backed away from the laptop like it had shown me my own death. I didn't want to look at her. I didn't want to be in that kitchen. I didn't even want to be in this timeline anymore. Because something was happening to us. Not betrayal, not cheating, not lies. Something underneath all of it. Older, colder, something that had been watching us fail. I turned away and walked to the living room. I didn't want to hear her voice anymore. That's when I noticed the message light blinking on our landline. We barely used it. We kept it because our internet provider gave us a discount if we bundled. 1 new voicemail. Timestamped this morning. 9:46 a.m. I pressed play. A voice came through. Low, calm, crackling slightly as if from a cheap microphone. It was the same voice I'd heard on the phone the other day. The stranger. The one who told me to check Bandit's collar. This time, he only said one thing. "You need to leave before you remember too much." Then silence. Then the dial tone. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't leave a note. I didn't even close the laptop. I just grabbed my keys, shoved my wallet into my back pocket, and walked straight out the door. Darla didn't stop me. She didn't follow me either. She just stood there in the kitchen, staring at the paused frame on the screen. That impossible video of us saying things we never said, on a day we both remembered differently. I got into my car and started driving. I didn't know where I was going, just away. Out of the house, out of the neighborhood, out of whatever loop we'd somehow fallen into. I figured if I could get out of town, put distance between me and whatever was happening in that house, I could think clearly again. Maybe even wake up from this slow living fever. I took the back roads. I didn't want to pass the grocery store or the school where Darla taught. I didn't want any landmarks, no reminders of a life that was no longer mine. I drove until the familiar houses turned to farmland, then faded into dense, tree-lined stretches. The road curved like a snake with no intention of straightening. But after about 25 minutes, I started noticing something strange. A gas station I thought I'd already passed once. A mailbox with our neighbor's last name, Heller. Except I knew the Hellers lived 2 streets behind us, not out here near the county line. Then I saw the church, St. Maro's, small white building with a green steeple and 2 benches out front. I remembered it because it had burned down 3 years ago in a lightning storm. Darla and I had watched the smoke from our back porch, and yet, there it was. Whole. Restored. Fresh paint. No scorch marks. No sign it had ever been touched. I pulled over. I got out. I walked up to the door, hand shaking, heart thudding like a warning bell. I didn't know what I expected. To find someone inside who could tell me what was going on, to confirm I was going crazy. Instead, I found a man sitting on the left bench, middle-aged, tan jacket, faded jeans, a plastic grocery bag at his feet. He looked up when I approached and smiled like we were old friends. "You're out early today," he said. I froze. "Do I know you?" He cocked his head. "Funny, you always ask that the first time." I didn't respond. I took a slow step back. He didn't follow. He just picked up his bag, stood, and walked toward the gravel road behind the church. But as he passed me, he leaned in close and whispered, "You were never meant to get this far." Then he disappeared into the trees. I drove again, faster this time, panicked, desperate to hit a highway, a checkpoint, something real. I passed more houses, same layout, same porch furniture. Then, my heart nearly stopped. I passed our house, or a version of it. Same porch swing, same chipped mailbox, same ugly rose bush Darla always forgot to water. But it wasn't our house. Not exactly. It was mirrored, flipped. Like someone had built a copy from memory, but got the orientation wrong. I kept going. I didn't care if the road collapsed beneath me. I just had to get out. I drove until my gas tank dropped to empty, ignoring the warning chime like a child blocking his ears. Finally, I coasted into a clearing and slammed the brakes, and that's when I saw it, our real house. Again. This time, unmistakable. The dog bowl still on the porch, Darla's yellow jacket hanging from the railing. I got out of the car and stumbled forward, heart hammering. I hadn't turned around. I hadn't doubled back, but the road had returned me anyway. I stood in the yard, sweat dripping down my neck, staring at the place I had just left. And then I noticed something new. The front window was open. Inside, just barely visible through the curtain, was me, sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the TV. Same shirt, same posture, same slight slump in the left shoulder I got after tearing a ligament in college. But I was out here. So, who the hell was that? The front door creaked open. Darla stepped outside. Except this wasn't the Darla I'd left in the kitchen. Her hair was tied differently. Her shirt was one she hadn't worn in months. Her face wasn't surprised. It was expectant. She looked right at me and smiled. Not kindly, not cruelly. Just like someone watching the final scene of a play they had already seen a dozen times. "Lowell," she said softly, "you always come back when the loop resets." My knees buckled. I dropped to the grass. I didn't even feel the impact. I just stared at her, breathing like I'd run a marathon, brain unraveling. "I don't want to come back," I whispered. She nodded, sympathetic. "I know, but that's not up to you." Behind her, through the cracked doorway, I saw the other me stand up and walk deeper into the house. The door shut gently. I heard the lock click. I stayed there, crouched in the yard, as everything felt like it tilted 30 degrees to the left. Like the world had seams. Like none of this was real, or maybe more real than anything I'd known before. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there until the porch light flicked on, and I realized it was no longer day. The sky had skipped straight to night, like a page had been turned, and I was still inside the book. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the backyard, curled up against the dew-soaked grass like a man who had forgotten how beds worked. The stars overhead felt too close, too still, like painted dots instead of burning suns. I watched them until my eyelids turned heavy and the air around me started to hum again. But I didn't fall asleep. Not really. Because at some point, I stood up and walked back into the house. It let me in. Darla was gone. No yellow jacket on the porch, no lights, no second version of me pacing the living room. Just silence. Real this time. Not cinematic silence, not scripted silence, but the stillness of a place that's finally out of ideas. I walked straight to the hall closet and pulled up the floorboard where the attic wire had fed through. I didn't hesitate. I didn't even think. I just started digging. I used my hands at first, then a screwdriver, Then a rusted trowel from the garage. I clawed through insulation, plaster, the skeletal beams of this endless version of home until I hit something that sounded hollow. A wooden box, old, locked. The padlock was rusted shut, but the wood cracked easily under pressure. When I pried it open, the smell hit first. Dry, almost sweet, like cedar mixed with thyme. Inside, I found a stack of photographs. Real photographs. The kind you hold with both hands because the paper feels important. They weren't surveillance images. They weren't labeled or cropped. Just quiet moments. Me and Darla on a beach I didn't remember. Laughing at a dinner table lit by candles. A blurry shot of us dancing in what looked like a living room, surrounded by people I didn't recognize. And in all of them, we looked alive, unperforming, messy, whole. In the final photo, we were lying in the grass, maybe in this very backyard, fingers laced together, eyes closed, facing the sky. The camera had caught it from above, just slightly out of focus. But I could see it clearly. We were holding hands. And smiling, like we'd escaped something. On the back of the photo, written in a handwriting I didn't recognize but somehow trusted, were the words, "This version made it out. Keep going until it's real." I held that photo against my chest and wept, not out of grief, but relief. Because in that moment, I realized something so quietly miraculous that I almost laughed. The loop didn't end because I broke it. It ended because I finally understood it. I had spent weeks, maybe longer, trying to escape by running, fighting, digging, unraveling. I thought if I exposed enough secrets, I could destroy the machinery behind it all. But it wasn't about destruction. It was about remembrance. The memories they'd erased, the conversations they'd rewritten, the things I was never meant to know. They weren't traps. They were breadcrumbs. Each glitch, each mistake, each out-of-sync smile had been a signal from some past version of me. A message from those who had made it farther. A reminder, keep going, keep loving, keep choosing to wake up. And now, I had. The next morning, I opened the curtains and the sun felt right again. Not manufactured, not looped, just warm. I made coffee, real coffee. No second mug on the counter. Bandit came padding into the kitchen, wagging his tail like none of it had ever happened. He nudged my leg, I picked him up, and he licked my face like he'd been waiting for me to return. Darla came home later. Only this time, her eyes didn't scan me like a stranger. She walked in like someone who remembered everything. We didn't speak at first. She just came to me, slow and unsure, and I met her halfway. "I saw the photos," I whispered. She nodded, her voice cracked. "I left them there for us." And then we embraced, not as two broken people trying to survive an endless loop, but as the versions of ourselves who finally made it through. Not perfect, not flawless, just free. Somewhere deep beneath the house, I imagine the recordings are still buried, corrupted and forgotten, the footage looping silently in empty files no one will ever watch again. But here, in this version, we stopped watching. We started living, and that finally was enough.